there'd been a fire in the Elizabeth Road area of Boston.
Police discovered a woman, early 30s, in a flat on her own, dead.
It was clearly a very violent, cold-blooded killing.
It was scary, not something you expect to happen on your doorstep.
The people of Boston feared that there was a killer at large.
We thought, is this to do with this gang-related thing? They'd just got her. They'd found out where she lived and got her.
In the heart of the Lincolnshire countryside is the thriving market town of Boston.
Boston's a town that's steeped in history. At one stage, it was the second largest port in the UK to Liverpool. You've got such things as the Guildhall.
We got a nice Boston stamp. It's a big church, which is very beautiful architecture. You can see from anywhere. If you get lost, just to look for a Boston stamp.
Because it's rural, you've got plenty of nice open spaces. And then you've got a town with local people in it, local trades.
It was a small village and now it's a town. And they're very lovely people, very laid back. They have a very Bostonian humour about them.
Anybody that comes past, it's always good morning. It's not like city life where they just ignore each other.
No, we'd be sat on the doorstep having a cup of tea. An old woman or someone comes past, you're like, you all right, good morning?
Yeah, you don't know him from Adam, but you just say good morning.
Yeah.
With its surrounding farmland, Boston has long been a draw for those looking for work.
Boston is essentially the vegetable breadbasket of the United Kingdom. About a third of the fresh fruit and vegetable comes from that area in the whole of the UK.
Farmers need, packhouses need X amount of casual labour. Boston doesn't hold that amount of casual labour, so that labour has to come in from elsewhere. And that's always been the case all the way back.
In recent years, the town has been transformed by the arrival of workers from across Europe.
Boston's changed incredibly over the last 20 years with the migration from the European Union. It's had the highest amount of migration for anywhere in the country. The first wave came from Portugal, but gradually as more Eastern European countries came into the EU, it was predominantly Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and then Poland, and latterly Bulgaria and Romania.
Many European people here. There's lots of factory and field work, jobs around, many cabbages. That's where you got sprouts for Christmas. So we are not that bad.
33-year-old Marina Urte moved to Boston in 2007 to start a new life for herself.
Marina came from Latvia. She found work at a fruit packaging plant, and I think she was fairly popular there and well-liked.
She was more crazier than me. No, she was a lovely girl. She was beautiful, quite popular. When she started her work, she'd been offered higher position than other people. She was like a leader.
She was known as being quite frank and quite honest, but also a hard worker.
She wanted jobs done right. She would tell you where to go, what to do and how to do. And if obviously somebody was doing something wrong, she wouldn't be quiet. Quite perfectionist.
We were working together in the same factories and we would go out partying sometimes, but I would say most of our time we would spend at the job. Me and Marina, we were similar in terms of career progression and temperament and wanting to improve, earn more money and create more comfortable life for us.
Marina had settled into Boston, and with a steady job and a new group of friends, she met 33-year-old Gytis Griskavikas.
She met Gytis in 2009. He came from Lithuania.
He used to work with us at the factory as well. He was a very nice, intelligent guy, very friendly, very caring. And I just remember that he turned up at our door, taking her out somewhere. They were really happy, they were really in love.
And they married quite quickly, I think, in 2010.
They have a nice wedding, and she have a nice dress, and it was like a fairy tale, like a big love story. They loved each other, and that was really in love and happy.
He was flying and he had all the sparks in his eyes, and Marina, so yeah, they were in love.
And it wasn't long before Marina and Gytis decided to start a family together. In November 2010, Marina gave birth to their baby daughter.
She was very good mommy. She adored her little girl. She was always calling her little princess, always.
Gytis, likewise, was also a good husband and a good dad. They were a normal, happy family.
Sadly, the relationship between Marina and Gytis didn't last. But they both agreed to raise their daughter together whilst living separately. And as Marina continued to impress at her job, she began to think big for her future.
She was always taking care of flowers, and she always dreamed to have some little shop with many different kinds, and she would sell them for special occasions like weddings or big birthdays.
But in the summer of 2016, everything changes when one of Marina's neighbours calls an emergency engineer, believing there's been a gas leak.
The next door neighbour smelt something under the stairs.
But when the engineer arrives, he suspects the smell is coming from Marina's flat and looks through her letterbox. They spot a smouldering fire and call the fire brigade immediately.
Fire rescue.
Oh, hello. I've been called to the downstairs flat, but we can smell smoke from upstairs, and there's fire damage to the stairs.
Right, okay.
I remember learning there'd been a fire in the Elizabeth Road area of Boston. I don't think there was any obvious sign of a fire from outside, but certainly the neighbours were aware that it had been a fire.
The lady from downstairs thinks there'll be somebody inside upstairs, but we can't get up the stairs because they're too damaged.
Okay, we have got fire crews on the way to it, okay.
Firefighters force their way into the flat and put out the smouldering fire, whilst checking if anyone is home. At first it appears empty, but as the crew enter the bathroom, they make a shocking discovery.
They find a woman, early 30s, in a flat on her own, dead. Obviously by strange circumstances, in a bath, no water in the bath, covered in soot, with a hose on top of her. You know, you think, good gracious, you know, how on earth has this happened?
Police are immediately called to the scene.
I want to know what the cause of death is roughly at that stage. So is it a homicide? Is it suspicious? I mean, just because a body's been found in the bath doesn't necessarily mean it's suspicious. It could have been an accidental fire or something like that.
Police quickly established that the dead woman is Marina Ertey. It becomes obvious she has been brutally attacked, with horrific injuries to her face and body. A murder investigation is immediately launched and officers secure the scene.
It's all about scene preservation. The scene can tell you a phenomenal amount, and the last thing that you need is that scene corrupting.
News of Marina's death quickly spreads through the street.
We all gets moved out of the flat, and then next hour or so, turns out she's been murdered in a battle. We never, ever thought for a second that there was a murder. We just generally thought there was a fire. Not something you expect to happen on your doorstep. It's just crazy.
In the quaint market town of Boston, Lincolnshire, the usual tranquility has been disturbed by the sirens of fire engines, and neighbours on Elizabeth Road are stunned to learn that not only was the fire set deliberately, but that 33-year-old Marina Ertey has been brutally murdered.
The residents were shocked to learn that it was a murder because initially, like everyone else, they thought it was a fire.
Everybody was in shock. You just didn't know how to get your head around it.
There was always a police car parked just there on the side.
Constant flashes, weren't
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
Forensic cameras, it was just unreal, wasn't it?
It's just not what we expected at all.
It is a quiet area, so for something like this just happened, like, I think it did shake everybody up, to be honest.
When a crime like that hits Boston, it's very painful to hear. Some Bostonian people, they do feel afraid, they feel afraid going out. It just brings this grey shadow over your community.
As Marina has been senselessly attacked in her home for no apparent reason, the community is on high alert.
The people of Boston feared that there was a killer at large.
It was scary. There was always that worry of somebody coming back. They could have potentially took more lives.
It isn't long before Marina's family and friends learn of the brutal attack on their loved one.
Someone texted me saying that the fire brigade and police is there, so she's been killed.
I was in shock. I couldn't believe. It was my birthday, so obviously from very high happiness I went in deep sadness and proper shock. I thought, what? Is that really possible?
With a murder investigation underway, police need to establish a timeline of Marina's last known movements.
There's all sorts of inquiries that need to be made. We would have people immediately looking for CCTV in the area. We'd have people very, very quickly knocking on doors to find out who's been seen in the area, who hasn't. We need to find out when this happened, because that's the starting point, isn't it? When was she last seen, and who was she last seen by? Also, where she worked, who she would normally work with, when should she have been in at work last?
Officers speak to Marina's colleagues at the fruit packing factory where she worked and narrow the time frame on her last known movements.
Police discovered Marina hadn't turned in for work 5 o'clock that morning. So clearly, whatever had happened before that time. And that's absolutely key part of the investigation.
Back at the scene, police and fire experts examine the cause of the fire and quickly establish it had been purposely set after Marina had died.
The early forensic evidence showed that a fire had been set in the flat, but it didn't take properly, so the house wasn't badly damaged by fire.
The fire didn't really take, I think it was just slow burning. But if they'd done a good job on the fire, it could have just took this whole block. That was scary.
With the fire having been set after the attack, detectives speculate whether Marina's killer had tried to destroy evidence at the scene.
They won't have known if they left any forensic evidence there. They won't have known if they left any fingerprints there. They won't have known for sure that someone didn't see them either going or coming back.
Forensic experts are called in. They need to examine the scene to find any clues that might point to Marina's attacker.
When we got there, it was obvious that I wasn't able to do my job. The reason I couldn't do it is because the fire that was started on the stairs had produced a certain excessive amount of soot throughout the flat. And the whole flat was covered in a thin layer of soot, which meant you couldn't see the blood. So at that point, after a brief look around, and we did locate some bloodstains, but it was obvious that the extent of that was much more than what we could see. We decided to go home and have a team of people come in and de-soot the scene, and then us to go back after that process has been done.
Forensics must wait until the thick layer of soot is meticulously cleared before they can work. But detectives do manage to question Marina's ex-husband, Gitas. He says he hasn't seen her, but reveals some information which leads investigators to look deeper into Marina's personal life. and they uncover some disturbing connections to some violent people.
Following the ending of her relationship with Gitas in 2015, she'd formed a new relationship. And it was quickly discovered that she had been involved in a very recent trial at Lincoln Crown Court. She had been charged with perverting the course of justice after her new partner was involved in a violent attack on another group of East Europeans.
The man in question is 42-year-old Alexandra Kudryasov.
Alexander, he worked at the same factory as well. Alexander was involved in what's it called, criminal activity and deviant behaviors and everything. He's got quite a rough background.
Police found out that a new boyfriend had recently been sent to prison for 18 years for grievous bodily harm, dreadful attacking involving knives. And Marina herself had been acquitted for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice in providing him with an alibi, only a matter of days before her body was found. Clearly, it was an obvious line of inquiry that her death might be something to do with those circumstances.
Police want to know, was Marina's involvement in a gang dispute anything to do with her death? Could this have been a revenge attack?
One theory that the police would have been exploring is that maybe one members of the group that were the victims would exact revenge on Marina's partner, and the fact that he had been convicted and was now out of the way meant that, of course, there was no one to protect Marina at the time.
Police explore the possibility Marina had become mixed up with a bad crowd through her relationship with Alexander. The theory of a revenge attack takes hold, and the safety of Marina's friends and family becomes a police priority.
The fact that a group of East European men have been very, very badly injured by another group of East European men, obviously down in Boston, there would have been tensions between the various people involved, the various families.
Clearly, one of the concerns for the police initially was the welfare of the child.
Fists, kicking, or a blunt instrument.
It was clearly a very violent and cold-blooded killing.
And with the scene now cleared of soot from the fire, forensic results arrive, which further paints a horrific picture.
What we found was a large pool of blood in the living room with smears around it, and there were small spots of blood radiating from it, indicating that there's been impacts in that area, probably into Marina herself. I suspect that she's gone into the living room for whatever reason, been hit, gone down almost straight away, and then been assaulted on the floor by punching or kicking or with a blunt instrument.
Forensic results also show bloody track marks from the living room to the bathroom.
The two track marks is where her heels were in contact with the ground as she's been dragged across the landing and into the bathroom. In the bathroom, there were spatters of blood around the bath and on the floor to indicate that she'd been further assaulted in that area. Her body was found naked in the bath. There was no blood-stained clothing, so when it happened, she was most likely naked. And the pathologist said that Maria had actually been drowned by having the shower head forced into her mouth, and it was that which actually killed her in the end, was the cause of death.
But who could have carried out such an horrific attack? Had Marina become sucked into a gangland dispute and paid the ultimate price for it?
We'd heard that she'd gone to court to do with this gang-related thing.
Yeah.
We thought she'd just got her. They'd found out where she lived and got her.
In the Lincolnshire town of Boston, police are investigating the murder of 33-year-old Marina Urte, who was found in her own home, beaten and drowned in the bath. Her boyfriend, Alexandra Kudryasov, is in prison, serving an 18-year sentence for a vicious attack during a gangland dispute. Whilst he is ruled out as a suspect, there are suspicions that Marina has been murdered in a gangland revenge attack.
After it happened, we used to see this really spruced up black car coming past. We kept thinking, oh, is this to do with, like, this gang-related thing? That's pretty much everybody's first thoughts, wasn't it?
But police are keeping an open mind.
It's the age-old adage, ABC of investigating. Accept nothing, believe no one, and check absolutely everything. If it was anything to do with the grievous bodily harm trial and Marina being acquitted of conspiracy and almost a revenge attack by perhaps those people that had been the victims in the first place, one would expect it to be almost tit for tat. Revenge is usually about, I'm going to give you what you gave to me. That's what revenge is. Revenge doesn't normally extend to attacking a defenseless woman in her own home, viciously and violently over a prolonged period of time. That, to me, was not a revenge attack.
Police also suspect that the lack of a forced entry points to a different explanation.
That immediately means to me, this is personal. That would be my first thought there. This is not a random attack. This isn't a burglary gone wrong or anything like that. This is personal, for some reason or other. Whoever did this to Marina knew her, and Marina knew them and had let them in the house.
With this latest theory, police look closely at Marina's inner circle.
One of the key elements is always to find out who saw the victim alive last.
Police would have been looking to question those who were closely connected to Marina. That would have been her former partner and her former husband, also her sister who lived nearby. As every police officer knows, most murders are committed by people known to the victim, so it would have been their primary avenue of inquiry.
As Marina and her ex-husband Gytis had shared custody of their daughter, police question him about the last time he saw her.
Under questioning, Gytis did disclose his movements on the night and day before the murder. He disclosed that he'd been celebrating his birthday.
He immediately said, yeah, Marina had come to his house, had then gone to a supermarket and bought some whiskey, and then gone back to her flat.
This would have been late in the evening into the early hours of the next day. And he said that he left Marina's flat at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that when he left, she was fine.
They had a pleasant evening, they'd had a few drinks, but there was nothing else. He was saying, it's not me.
With Gytis admitting to being with Marina on the night of the murder, but claiming to have left on good terms at 2 a.m., investigators have little else to link him to the murder.
But he'd said that he'd been at the flat the night before. That poses actually an interesting dilemma for a senior investigating officer. Is what do you do with that? It's only suspicion. There is no hard evidence. You are hoping you're going to find some hard evidence through maybe forensic examination of the scene, CCTV, or anything like that. But that takes a long time.
Even without evidence against Gytis, police need to act fast in case he is in any way connected to the crime.
As the senior investigating officer, it's your decision whether to arrest a suspect, and not only whether to arrest a suspect at that time, when you do it and under what circumstances. The senior investigating officer in this case took the view that it was the most advantageous way for the investigation was to make an early arrest.
Gytis Griskevicius is arrested on suspicion of the murder of his ex-wife Marina.
Won't have been an easy decision. There would have been a train of thought undoubtedly about, well, there's no evidence here that he's involved. There will have been opinions within senior officers, probably more senior than the SIO in this case, that he shouldn't have been arrested. We would know that we'd only be able to keep him in custody a maximum of 24 hours, and if no evidence came forward during that period of time, he'd have to be released. So it's not a straightforward decision.
With the time ticking against them, police further question Gytis under caution.
He gave the same story as he'd done before he'd been arrested, that he'd been there with Marina voluntarily, he'd left around 2 o'clock in the morning, and she was fine when he left her.
But with Gytis now in custody, police can delve deeper into his life to find any evidence that might connect him to Marina's murder.
Once we arrest him, the purpose of that is to enable the police to search the house, search his vehicle, search him, examine him for any injuries.
On closer examination, officers notice an injury on Gytis' right hand, which he explains was caused by an accident. Despite the suspicious injury and Gytis being the last known person to see Marina alive, the police have no further evidence. And Gytis has been in custody for almost 24 hours.
One has to make a decision. Have we got enough evidence here to charge him? Clearly they hadn't.
Gytis is released on bail.
The news obviously left question marks for people in the area. Was this the man? Had they caught the killer? Or was the perpetrator still at large?
Police now move their focus away from Gytis and cast the net wider. They trawl through hours of CCTV across the local area in hopes to find anything that might lead them to Marina's killer.
They would have trawled hundreds of hours of CCTV.
CCTV examination is an art form. It isn't just a straightforward process. It can take weeks and weeks and weeks to do it methodically. Some of the bigger police forces these days have dedicated teams whose sole job it is to do that.
And after hours of examination, police find footage from the early hours of the 20th of May, the day Marina was thought to have been murdered. And it places Gytis back in the frame.
They managed to find him on CCTV.
The footage shows Gytis running towards Marina's house at 9:30 p.m. Rather than he had claimed, heading there with Marina after a party at his. Then, 2 hours later at 11:30 p.m, Marina and Gytis are seen together at a nearby supermarket. And then, crucially, he is caught on camera returning to his house much later than 2 a.m, the time he told police.
So he had not left Marina's home at 2 o'clock in the morning and gone straight home. He was seen around 7:30 in the morning, and I believe he got back to his own premises around about 8 o'clock in the morning. So straight away they know he wasn't where he said he was, when he said he was there. The story he gave from the outset was a pack of lies.
The CCTV footage disproves Gytis' story and places him near to the scene on the morning of the murder. But the police still need more evidence to strengthen their case.
The police would then start thinking, well, how can we bolster this circumstantial evidence?
The police then begin to find other pieces of evidence that link him to the murder. A pair of his shorts were found in his washing machine, which he was seen to be wearing on CCTV.
And lo and behold, no blood was found on the shorts or anything like that. But the police would then say, well, where's the hoodie that he was wearing? Where are the T-shirt that he was wearing? Where's his footwear? Where are his socks? None of which was ever found. The fact that he couldn't account for that, again, just adds to the circumstantial evidence.
Gytis' phone is seized and searched, which raises further suspicion.
They found he had inadvertently wiped all the data off his phone.
The police believe Gytis deliberately wiped his phone to hide incriminating messages. But with the only evidence being circumstantial, and forensic results from the scene showing no strong link to Gitas being the killer, will it be enough to charge him for murder? Or will the theory of a gang-related revenge attack for the crimes of her boyfriend hold the truth to the killing? Lincolnshire police are investigating the murder of 33-year-old mum Marina Urte. And although they have circumstantial evidence that links her ex-husband Gitas Griskevicius to the crime, they are lacking forensic evidence. Meanwhile, her new boyfriend is serving 18 years in prison for a violent assault on a rival gang, and there's a theory Marina could have been killed in a revenge attack. Then the police make an announcement. The Crown Prosecution Service has decided to send the case to trial. And it's Gitas they believe is the killer.
Following the CCTV and other pieces of evidence, Gitas was rearrested and charged with the murder.
Gitas pleads not guilty. And with the evidence being mainly circumstantial, the police have their work cut out to prove there is enough to convict him.
Certainly the lead up to a trial for murder involves a phenomenal amount of work. Making sure the evidence is presented in the correct fashion, making sure witnesses turn up. My feeling at the beginning of every murder trial I've been involved in was a fear of being perceived to have let the victim and the victim's family down. They are completely beholding upon you as an individual to bring some justice for their loved one.
In March 2017, the trial into Marina's murder begins at Lincoln Crown Court. And as Marina's friends and family enter the courtroom, they come face to face with her alleged killer.
When I came in, he looked at me with the eyes full of almost tears, and he looked at me as if I didn't do it.
As the trial begins, Marina's close friends reveal to the court details of her relationship with Gitas.
I remember she came to me when she was already heavily pregnant, and she was complaining that she's put on so much weight and Gitas is not happy anymore because she's not in the same shape as before. So I did notice that something was off. Why would you judge your wife for being a bit overweight when she's carrying your child?
And as time went by, the relationship continued to break down.
Then Gitas stopped investing into the family, doing anything around the house. And she would work and she would take all overtimes. So sometimes she would go weeks without a day off. And she would mention to him, maybe you should work more, or maybe you should at least wash the dishes. Then he would turn it back on her and humiliate her in terms of the weight or how she looks.
Marina then began to consider a life away from her husband.
She said to me that she wants a real man who'd take care of her and she would feel loved and cared for.
And in 2015, Marina broke off the relationship. And it wasn't long before she met her new partner, Alexander.
Marina was very happy. She said that I finally feel like a woman and I finally feel like I've been cared for. He gave me a perfume, and she said that over all these years with Gitas, he never gave her anything like that. She felt so much appreciated.
And friends revealed to the court that Gitas did not take Marina's new relationship well.
Griskevicius was still besotted with Marina. They'd split acrimoniously, but he still harboured a desire to get back with her. And he hated the fact that she was now with someone else.
He was described as being very jealous about the new boyfriend.
I met with him a few times on the street, and he said, how could she leave him? Because he's so good in bed. So he was not even thinking about the quality of life. He was raging about if his size is larger than his, how could she swap me for someone else?
But when Marina was arrested for perverting the course of justice, Gytis decides to use their daughter as leverage to get her back.
When police come up and arrested her, she didn't have a passport, she lost the job, and she didn't have a place to live. She lost everything, and in that moment, he got the girl.
She was praying and hoping that everything's gonna work out so she could then finally reunite with her daughter.
When she was fully acquitted of any wrongdoing, Marina asked to be reunited with her daughter. But Gytis refused.
I told him that you probably ought to allow Marina see the child, at least under the supervision of social workers in the children's center once a week for a few hours. She's probably missing her mother, and he was absolutely reluctant to do that, and he mentioned that we don't even mention mother's name in the house. Her girl was not allowed to pronounce her name in front of him.
He was sending her nasty messages about the girl, like no money, no honey, asking for money. Then he was taking girl out from the country, which she supposed not to do, and then posting in a Facebook saying, oh, hello, we are here. That was very nasty.
And things only got worse for Marina.
Marina had made all sorts of complaints against Griskevicius. She couldn't prove any of them. I think her vehicle had been damaged, she'd had a pedal bike stolen. She didn't know that it was him for sure, but she thought it really was, and it frightened her. There were a couple of occasions when she went to the police because he was seen filming her on his mobile phone, arriving at her house unannounced, and it spooked her to such an extent she went to the police.
I think Marina had confided in certain friends that she was worried that Gytis was stalking her.
She rings me one day, she says, he was standing on the corner of the street looking at the house.
However, in the last few days of Marina's life, hers and Gytis' relationship seemed to rekindle.
They restarted the communication. She rang me and she was so happy to say, oh, you don't know what just happened. I will see the child soon and he's talking to me in a nice way. And she was willing to resolve the conflict for her, for the daughter, and for him, for Gytis even. Just before the day, she rang me and she was very excited. And he said that he loves me and he wants to get back. He's the father of my child. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. And he wants to come over. He wants to celebrate his birthday with me. And I did tell her, do not meet him on your own.
Griskevicius was still besotted with Marina. I think he saw an opportunity there to say, right, I'm the father of your child. This is my birthday. Let's celebrate together, give it another go, and rekindle our marriage.
Back in the courtroom, it appears with only circumstantial evidence, Gytis could still walk free. But then a new witness takes to the stand and flips the case on its head.
This individual contacted the police and said, this guy admitted to me what he'd done. He admitted to me that he'd murdered Marina, and then he admitted that he'd set fire to the premises. And I'm prepared to give evidence to that effect.
After a grueling 2-week trial at Lincoln Crown Court, the jury returns its verdict. Gytis Griskevicius is found guilty of Marina Urte's murder. He is sentenced to life with a minimum of 23 years in prison.
The guy came and gave his evidence, and obviously the jury took it on board, and ultimately, with that and with all the circumstantial evidence, unanimously convicted him of murder. He's got to spend 23 years in jail before he even becomes eligible for parole. That's a long time by anyone's book. But you know, he committed one of the most horrific crimes you can imagine. On a defenceless mother of his own child, my view is that he deserves every one of those 23 years.
But why did Gytis decide to kill Marina? On that fateful night on the 20th of May 2016.
I think it was about the fact that she was shunning his advances. Even though a new boyfriend was going to be in prison for 18 years, she still wanted to stick by him. He couldn't bear the thought of that. And I think he thought, well, if I can't have you, no one else can.
I think Gytis was jealous and had been humiliated by the new relationship, and that was his motive for the murder.
He'd taken the poor woman, battered and beaten, from one part of the flat to another, where he attacked her again, bundled her into a bath, and then drowned her with a hose. I mean, how callous and calculating can he get?
And for Marina's neighbours, her killing still haunts them to this day.
I always get the question, did you not hear anything? I'm like, no, I didn't. I'm like, so wish I did. It was in my mind for a very long time, thinking, why the hell could I not just hear anything? And then maybe we could have given her some hope. No matter how much danger I'd be in, I would have busted through the door and tried to help. 100%. If I'd have heard anything, I'd have gone straight in there and tried to help her. Even though I'd be putting myself at danger, I'd still help her, because nobody deserves to lose life like that.
And for Marina's friends and family, with the case behind them, they are slowly coming to terms with a life without her.
The biggest thing I miss about Marina is her liveliness. She was very, very positive girl, full with ideas, full with life.
I miss everything about her because I don't have anyone similar to her. She was a very good friend, and in my difficult situations, when I'm so upset and I'm so down, I know that she would be the person to turn to. She would just tell me, everything's gonna be all right. Don't worry about anything. Everything's gonna be perfect. And she had so much power in these words that I would...
Police have launched a murder inquiry after an elderly woman was found dead at her home in Fleckney.
I was gobsmacked. There's something could happen like this, literally on my doorstep.
This case was one of a kind. Not only the nature of it, but the brutal nature of it.
When I found out, it just floored me. How? Why could that happen?
This is an old lady who's been murdered and seriously sexually assaulted in her home.
How could somebody that I'd grown up with be capable of doing something like that?
A lot of people were generally scared.
This just doesn't look right.
There was no sign of forced entry, so it was obvious that it was somebody that she knew.
Open the door!
At this moment in time, I'm resting suspicion of murder.
Seven miles south of Leicester, in the heart of the English countryside, lies the quaint village of Fleckney.
Fleckney is a quiet village. It's very close now. It's like it has its own little bubble. People are very close. Everybody knows everybody. Most people are related in Fleckney.
Beautiful rural settings, friendly people, local community is fantastic. But yeah, lovely, lovely place to live and grow up in.
It's not the sort of place where a lot of crime happens. I'd been to Fleckney a few times that had nothing to do with crime. I'd been there to judge a talent contest. I think it was called Fleckney's Got Talent.
The people who live in Fleckney are generally well-to-do. It's quite a low-crime area. There are retiring people there. There's some retirement bungalows around there. There's not a lot of throughfare. The people who are in Fleckney are generally the people who live there rather than the people who visit there.
And it was this perfect, idyllic village that 72-year-old Jane Hings chose to retire to.
Jane was an only child, and her mum and dad sadly passed away years before, which left her on her own with no immediate family around. Jane was quite a private person. She didn't like everyone to know, her business, and kept herself to herself, really. But once you got to know her, she opened up more, and it was just fun. She had quirky ways about her, but she was kind and she was caring.
Everybody in Fleckney knew Jane. She relied on people to give her a lift to the hairdressers, to the shops, things like that. She was inoffensive in every way. People didn't have bad things to say about her. And in her life beforehand, she worked hard.
Jane took pride in her appearance. She'd always, regular having her hair done every few weeks, and she'd always sort of make sure she was nicely dressed and put on a bit of makeup, so she'd still try and make the effort to look nice.
Having worked overseas as a nanny, Jane had settled into retirement, whilst also taking care of her much-loved rescue dog, Paddy.
He was spoilt rotten. Everything she did was for Paddy. You'd go in, there'd be dog treats stacked up to the ceiling. We'd lie on a bed at night and could look with her.
Whilst Jane used friends and neighbours to help walk Paddy, in the summer of 2017, an accident meant she needed a lot more care.
Goodbye. Jane had a fall and was admitted to hospital for about 3 or 4 weeks.
She'd suffered some injuries when her dog Paddy had pulled her over, and then when she came out of hospital, that's when she needed the carers and she needed help in getting around, and she couldn't go very far.
But the community came together for Jane, and she slowly got back on her feet.
She was the sort of person that people warmed to, they liked her, and they were happy to help out.
Then, just a few weeks after leaving hospital, tragedy strikes.
On the Sunday morning, Jane's carers went in as they were meant to, about 7 o'clock in the morning. Jane's front door was unlocked, which is normal. They went in. She was laid in bed. The cover was pulled up over her head and both of her arms were raised above her head. When they peeled back the duvet, which had covered her head entirely, they saw that she had died.
The carers are puzzled that Jane's body is covered completely by the duvet and call for an ambulance. Then, they notice something else unusual. Items are out of place in Jane's usually meticulous house.
And when the ambulance arrived, they could see that she'd been dead for some time. And the paramedic who was there, he looked around and could see that there'd been an untidy search. Some drawers were open, some things were knocked over.
Items were strewn across the floor, drawers were open.
Here is a lady who's died with the cover over her head, with the arms raised above the head, and it looks like there's been a burglary that's taken place.
With police at the scene, suspicions grow that this is not a natural death, and the house is immediately cordoned off. But with no obvious injuries, how Jane died is still a mystery, which means detectives begin to theorise what could have happened to the pensioner.
Is it a burglary that's gone wrong? Is it Jane who's suffered a heart attack following a burglary, or whether she has passed away and then a burglary has happened afterwards, or whether this is somebody who has murdered Jane and then burgled the bungalow afterwards?
The first step for detectives is to establish how Jane died.
I received a phone call from the duty detective inspector who said they had a death. They weren't 100% happy with it, and they would value my opinion on what was going on.
Dr. Hamilton attends the scene And as well as the unusual way Jane has been tucked into her bed, his suspicions are raised further.
And the most immediately concerning thing was that her nightdress appeared to be pulled up. And that seemed very unusual for somebody who'd simply died in their sleep. This just doesn't look right, it doesn't look normal.
As suspicions are raised that she could have been the victim of a sexual attack, Jane is taken for post-mortem. But almost immediately, everything changes.
This is HFM.
Police have launched a murder inquiry after an elderly woman was found dead at her home in Fleckney. The body was discovered in a bungalow on Elizabeth Road. It's thought the victim died at some point during Saturday evening or in the early hours of Sunday.
Whilst transporting Jane, a shocking piece of evidence has been found.
As we took the body, a tongue bar fell from one of the creases in the skin. Ms. Hings didn't have a tongue piercing, so we have evidence of somebody else very close to her body. That ultimately became one of the most important pieces of evidence in catching the killer.
On a quiet Sunday morning in the village of Fleckney in Leicestershire, residents are waking up to disturbing news of a possible murder on their doorstep.
This is HFM.
Further tests are being carried out to try to determine what killed an elderly woman in her own home in Fleckney. It prompted police to launch a murder inquiry following the discovery of her body in the property on Elizabeth Road. There were signs of a disturbance in her bungalow, which has led officers to believe she may have been the victim of a burglary.
72-year-old Jane Hings has been found dead by her carers early on a Sunday morning. Her house has been burgled, and there's signs she has been sexually assaulted. Police are treating her death as suspicious and have cordoned off the scene.
There was police tape from the tree round to the lamppost. You couldn't get to where, if you can just see that red car behind this thing, that was all blocked off as well, because that's the back of her house. It's not something we expected to ever happen in Fleckney. It's such a quiet village, a nice village. I was gobsmacked. There's something could happen like this, you know what I mean? On my doorstep, literally on my doorstep. And for people that I knew.
It's a place where you can leave your doors and windows open. Everybody knows everybody. But, you know, this sent shockwaves through the community. And I think that a lot of people would have felt generally scared.
With the village inundated with police vehicles, Jane's loved ones are also confronted with the news of her death.
I'd arranged to go over to James on the Sunday morning to take Paddy for a walk. And as usual, I was running late. And I'd had no phone call, which was really strange. And then I pulled into the close where she lived and just saw loads of police cars, police vans, forensics, and yeah, that's when I found out. So I last spoke to Jane the night before. I was supposed to go and see her that day. I'd been on holiday, so I hadn't seen her for a couple of weeks. And we were on the phone for about an hour. I miss Jane. I miss the phone calls. There was so much she could have talked about her life, and I didn't get to hear any of it. And my phone is so deadly quiet all the time.
Whilst moving Jane's body, pathologists have discovered a tongue bar in her groin.
The investigation then shifted from, is this a burglary that's gone wrong, to this is an old lady who's been murdered and seriously sexually assaulted in her home.
That tongue bar was put into an evidence bag immediately. Everyone knew that this was potentially important. That went straight off. It was fast-tracked through the DNA lab.
As detectives wait for the DNA results, upmost on their mind is that this might not be an isolated incident.
One of our first lines of inquiry is to research cases of a similar nature, and we conducted a number of checks looking at anybody who was already convicted and in prison who could have been on day release for the same offence. But then this case was one of a kind. Not only the nature of it, but the brutal nature of it.
Immediately, door-to-door inquiries begin.
When officers initially attended the scene, we tried to identify people who would know Jane the last time that she was seen or spoken to.
Officers investigate whether Jane had any enemies in the village.
When we looked at Jane's past, there was no fallouts with anybody. There was nothing to indicate somebody with a vendetta, somebody with a grudge, any past history with anybody which would tell us this person has a long-running grudge against Jane and would want ill of her.
But locals have their own suspicions.
When the police first came, they said there was no sign of forced entry or anything like that, so it was obvious that it was somebody that she knew.
And it appears that whoever stole from Jane took some of her most precious items. Her wedding ring and a necklace are missing, along with her mobile phone, handbag, and £200. But police find an item they suspect doesn't belong to her.
Behind that bed, between the headboard and the wall, was a baseball cap found on the floor.
It was a designer cap, something that didn't belong to Jane.
The question police want to know is, whose hat is it? And did its owner have anything to do with Jane's death? With the post-mortem results in, it's apparent Jane has suffered a brutal attack.
Really tellingly, she had lacerations, she had tears, both to her anus and to her vagina. The external injuries were really focused around the mouth and the nose and the upper neck area. Ms. Hings didn't have that many injuries on her body, but what there was told a story. There was a little linear graze, a scratch on her neck, and we know that her necklace was missing. It would certainly fit with somebody having pulled that necklace and it scraping across the skin. The most important thing that the post-mortem brought out in itself was that there was no natural cause for her to die. No natural cause for Miss Hings to be dead. In addition, there was some quite disturbing bruising around her jawline, around her mouth, something that really makes you think we have to be sure that this woman hasn't been strangled or smothered.
Less than 24 hours after Jane was discovered, the fast turnaround DNA profile from the tongue bar is returned from the lab.
That profile was put into the DNA database and they soon had a match, they had a hit, and that match was Craig Keogh.
26-year-old Craig Keogh's DNA was on file, as he was known to the local police as a petty criminal. Now, he was part of a major manhunt.
Craig Keogh was a local lad. He grew up in the area. He still lived in the area. Craig led a transient lifestyle. He doesn't have a car, he didn't have a phone, he didn't have a job, he didn't claim benefits. So trying to work out where he lived in the Fleckney area meant we had to do a lot of inquiries at a fast pace, but in a discreet way as well.
Police managed to trace Craig to a caravan which was on the outskirts of Fleckney, but not very far from where Jane lived.
Once we'd identified that he was living in a caravan, we sent officers there.
Someone in the caravan! Police! Open the door! Police, open the door! Someone with the dark hair in there.
And there was a slight standoff of about 30 seconds where the caravan was surrounded and Craig took some time coming to the door before he's arrested.
Right, hands behind back.
Right, at this moment in time, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder. Arrest necessary for prompt and effective investigation. You do not have to say anything. May harm to face. Do not mention one question. Something which later will lie in the court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Do you understand everything I've said to you?
Craig is taken into custody as detectives try to build a picture of the young man they suspect murdered Jane.
He didn't live far from Jane. He was a former factory worker. He'd been in trouble for burglary, a few break-ins and stealing from his parents and from a friend. But he wasn't known as a major criminal. He wasn't known for anything as horrific as this.
As Craig's DNA was identified on the tongue bar and in her bungalow, detectives want to know how it got there. Craig is interviewed under caution.
When was the last time you saw her then?
The last time I saw her was Sunday night.
Okay. What time would that have been?
I got there for about 10:30.
You got there at 10:30?
Yeah.
That's PM?
About 10:30 at night.
At night? Okay. So if we take from 10:30 at night then, through to when you left at 11,
Yeah.
tell me exactly in detail what happened.
Well, we was watching a little film on the TV, and then she asked me to have sex with her again.
Just tell me exactly what she said to you about having sex.
She just said, Craig, will you have sex with me? And then, well, the first time it started off was about a month ago, and I was in the house, and then she just came into the front room naked, and then she was like, Craig, come and do it with me and I'll pay you.
He offered the reason that his DNA was inside of Jane and inside the scene was because Jane had paid him for sex.
Okay, and how much did she pay you?
Yeah, she paid me £200.
£200.
In the village of Fleckney in Leicestershire, police have arrested 25-year-old Craig Keogh on suspicion of the murder of Jane Hings.
Do not have to say anything. May harm to face. Do not mention one question. Something which later will lie in the court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Do you understand everything I've said to you?
Could this local lad really be responsible for the rape and murder of a 72-year-old pensioner? The news has sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community.
How could somebody that I'd grown up with all these years could be physically capable of doing something like that? I felt sick and it was horrible. Like, who does think something like that? To such, you know what I mean? You hear about it, but she was an old lady. She was old. He was a young lad.
Keogh has been taken into custody and is being interviewed under caution. With his DNA found on the victim and at the scene, detectives want to know how Craig knows Jane. And he has an explanation.
I was walking through the village, and I saw this lady, and her shopping bag broke, and I helped her, and then I carried it to the house with her.
Craig told us in an interview that he met Jane when he was down the shops, and that she asked him to pick up some shopping for him and offered him some money for it, and then asked him to walk her dog, Paddy, as well.
But Craig alleges that it wasn't just household chores Jane was paying him for.
And then another time, she's asked me to have sex with her for money. And it happened a month ago, the first time. And then she's asked me to come back a month later. And then it happened again.
Key to the police investigation was the tongue piercing found in Jane's groin.
Have you got any piercings?
I got my ear pierced.
Your ear pierced? Okay. Anywhere else?
Yeah, my tongue pierced.
Your tongue?
Craig goes on to admit that he'd been with Jane the night she died, saying he arrived at her house around 10:30 p.m.
Tell me exactly in detail what happened.
Well, we was watching a little film on the TV, and then she asked me to have sex with her at the end, and she's like, "I'll pay you more this time." I was like, "Okay." I didn't think anything of it, and that was it really. And she said she felt sick, and then I left her.
Craig's detailed account that he had sex with Jane and left her very much alive turns the investigation on its head.
During the course of his interviews, he came up with an explanation as to what happened. And I have to say, it was so bizarre.
Craig also suggested that Jane, whilst alive, was unwell when he left.
What he was saying was that she'd become a little bit wobbly and a little bit unwell, and had then gone back to her bed. He'd then closed the door, and obviously whatever happened afterwards was someone else. Some stranger, no doubt having seen that the door was open, would have gone in there, burgled her, and perhaps killed her. And so that might possibly have been an explanation for what happened.
The interviewing officers had to keep an open mind, but had to probe and get as much detail from him as possible to find out whether it was right or not.
Was Craig telling the truth? Was Jane alive when he left? And so was it someone else who sexually assaulted and killed her? Forensics carry out a detailed search for additional DNA or fingerprints on Jane or in the bungalow.
There was nothing else from the scene, from Jane, from the post-mortem which identified anybody else other than Craig. We'd had all of these things examined, and they only pointed at Craig Keogh and did not point to anybody else.
With no one else in the frame, Craig's movements on the night in question are investigated.
Craig had been on a night out in Oadby, a nearby town.
I think it was between 8:30 he came in that night. Remember it well because Leicester City had played Liverpool on that night, so we had a fair few in. He stood out straight away because he had his baseball cap the other way around, and he was just bouncing up and down.
Staff at the pub said that he appeared agitated, aggressive, and almost as if he was up for a fight. They said he was high on drink and drugs.
Now, this was crucially important evidence because in his interviews, he said that by 10:30 that evening, he was sitting in Jane Hing's living room in Fleckney, watching a war film and having a drink with her. That was a lie. He was out with his friends. We were able, by that process, to show that he'd taken cocaine, that he was offering to sell other people cocaine, and that he was complaining about how boring the evening was.
As doubt is cast on Keogh's version of events, police trace his movements after he leaves the pub. He's next seen arriving back in Fleckney at just after 1 a.m.
His friends say that the last time they saw him was when the taxi dropped him off, and they assumed he was going home.
But Keogh walks in the opposite direction of his caravan, heading in the direction of Jane's bungalow.
We knew from CCTV that the suspect had walked to Jane's house wearing a baseball cap, and when they were walking away, they didn't have it on, and we could see that.
Detectives believe this places Keogh in Jane's bungalow around 1:15 a.m. And when he returns home, he's captured again.
We see him going back into his caravan, carrying something. Now, he goes out again, and he returns out around 2:30 in the morning for another 15 minutes or so, and we are certain that he went back to Jane Hing's house in that period of time. We don't know what he did.
The following morning, Craig is again seen on camera.
The morning after he was seen walking along the street, he was captured on CCTV with a black bin bag.
He's spotted again a few minutes later, but the bag has vanished. What did he dispose of? The police believe it was some of Jane's belongings, but a search of the area reveals nothing.
This is HFM.
It's 5 o'clock. This is HFM News. Detectives have been given more time to continue questioning a man on suspicion of murder following the discovery of a pensioner dead in her bungalow in Fleckney on Sunday morning. Officers also believe items were stolen from Miss Hings's bungalow in a black bin liner. They're appealing for villagers to check their gardens and outbuildings in case it's been discarded there. A post-mortem examination has so far failed to identify her cause of death.
With help from the public and CCTV, police are able to piece together Keogh's movements 24 hours after Jane's death. Friends described Craig as splashing his cash, buying them drinks and himself a new tongue bar.
He tried to get rid of Jane's jewellery in trying to sell it. He got rid of her handbag. He was trying to get rid of every last bit of evidence that would connect him to Jane.
He went into Leicester city centre and he actually went to a pawnbroker's. He sold her jewellery for about £100 when the items of jewellery were valued around £1,000.
With enough evidence that Keogh stole items from Jane and had raped her, detectives also believe they have a killer on their hands. But proving he murdered Jane was going to be their biggest challenge.
So far as murder was concerned, we had no cause of death. We were unable to show how she died, whether it was deliberate or accidental, forensically at that stage.
In the village of Fleckney, 25-year-old Craig Keogh has been charged with burglary, murder, and the rape of pensioner Jane Hings. The news that Jane was sexually assaulted in her home has been made public.
The community were on edge already, knowing that an old lady had been murdered in her home, but then once the true nature of it came out, people were really worried.
When I found out that information, it just floored me. It played on my mind all night. You know, a woman of that age, how, why could that happen?
I'd say the villagers would be distressed because a majority of them are similar sort of age to Miss Hinks. And, you know, and there's quite a few vulnerable people out there as well, and it obviously upset them, but also put a bit of fear into them as well, that this could happen on their doorstep.
Within days of his arrest, Keogh is brought before a judge and the charges read.
He pleaded not guilty to all the charges, so that was murder, 2 counts of rape and burglary.
Keogh is remanded in custody and a date set for his trial. But the work of the prosecution is only just beginning.
This was horrific violence perpetrated on a very frail old lady whilst she was still alive. And there was then the added complication of trying to prove how she died.
So one of Craig Keogh's lines of defence actually referred to him knowing Jane Hings, and yeah, he said that she paid him for sex, and that was a reason that he went around and he claimed she was still alive when he left her bungalow on that night.
Experts believe that Jane has been smothered with a pillow, and proving it was Keogh is imperative to the case.
The DNA on the pillows was of saliva, and so we could show that Jane's saliva was on the pillows. That was all.
Typically with a material object, you can't get fingerprints from it. And it's really difficult. For us as investigators, we sat there believing that the pillowcases were our murder weapon. How could we prove that?
With concern that Keogh might get away on a technicality, the police and prosecution reach out to forensic specialists.
Now, our pillowcases had been sat in the bottom of an evidence bag, sat in an exhibit store for, at this point, 4 months. They weren't laid out flat like you'd see in a movie or anything like this. This is a pillowcase shoved in the bottom of an evidence bag.
But as we got nearer to trial, we discovered a new scientific development.
Leicestershire Police said to me they had a pillowcase that they were interested in trying to develop some fingerprints on. They wanted to know whether a novel process I'd been researching was appropriate for this type of exhibit. I recommended that they tried vacuum metal deposition, and I also directed them towards Gloucestershire Police, who had a vacuum metal deposition machine that they could use and a trained operator, which is probably the best technique that we're aware of that gives you a chance of getting fingerprints on fabrics.
Vacuum metal deposition involves vaporizing gold and zinc in a vacuum chamber. The metallic particles are attracted to the fabric and form a negative image of finger marks wherever it has been touched.
So what you have here is the image of the pillowcase as it's come out of the vacuum metal deposition machine. These dark regions where you have quite a lot of zinc deposition, and you have these light regions where zinc simply hasn't deposited. It shows whereabouts the pillowcase has been gripped, and it also enables you to say, well, it's been touched there, so you can then target other techniques such as DNA recovery for those techniques.
We were able, therefore, to show that the pillow had been held in a position that you wouldn't hold a pillow ordinarily in order to put it over Jane Hing's head to kill her.
So that proved our murder weapon. We had Keogh's finger marks on the short edge and Jane's saliva in the middle of the pillow.
But the question is, would it be enough to convict Keogh? The trial begins at Birmingham Crown Court, and Jane's friends come face to face with Keogh.
Craig was just deadpan through the whole entire time. Not an ounce of remorse, not any kind of emotion. He showed nothing.
When Craig sat in the dock, he was expressionless. It was difficult to really see any signs of emotion.
Obviously, Jane's friends are of her age, so are a lot older and didn't want to go and sit through all of that. So I went and sat for her. I didn't want Craig to think that nobody cared about her. I wanted to be seen that, you know, she meant something to somebody.
Craig had denied all along that he was responsible for raping and murdering Jane Hings. In fact, his version of events was at complete odds with the prosecution's case, the police case. He had said that he had gone to see Jane to have sex. He said that they had watched a film together that night, a war film. Checks were made, and there was no war film on TV. It was a complete and utter lie.
Of Jane.
Craig Keogh was describing Jane Hings as being a sexually promiscuous, drunken woman who liked nothing more than spending her pension money on having intercourse with a young man. We discovered she didn't drink alcohol. There was no alcohol in her bloodstream after her death.
So the jury were then shown all the mobility aids that Jane had in the house, the fact that she couldn't walk between rooms without needing a walking stick or a frame.
So the idea of her being interested in active sexual activity was laughable.
Central to the prosecution case is proving that the sexual contact was non-consensual.
So we instructed an expert in sexual injuries to examine her body. And as a result of that, we were able to show that the sexual activity was not consensual activity, and it would have caused her significant amounts of pain, and it happened when she was alive.
And it was for this reason they believe Keogh decided to kill Jane.
She must have cried out when that happened, And he must have wanted not to be caught and to complete the act. And we know he did complete the act because there was semen within her body. And I expect that during the course of that sexual assault upon her, he decided to kill her because she wouldn't shut up.
Establishing that Keogh had the motive and opportunity to kill Jane, the prosecution introduces what they believe is the murder weapon.
The scientists went the extra mile on this one because they could show that finger marks left by Keogh were on the short, straight edges at the side, and they were gripped like this and applied. And they then took it one step further to look for the amylase staining, that's the protein staining in the middle, to show that Jane had exhaled a lot and it given out a lot of moisture from her breath, indicating that that's where she was smothered. And then when the scientists came to court to explain it, the jury was sat there like, oh wow, this is really impactful.
With the prosecution evidence built against him, Keogh remained silent.
Craig sat there very quiet. He chose not to give evidence. He chose not to be cross-examined by prosecutor, and he showed no remorse, even when the horrific details were read out of what he had done.
Craig Keogh could not offer any evidence which the jury could look at and say that he was not guilty. He couldn't offer any alibi, and he couldn't offer any plausible explanation as to why this had happened or why he was suspected of it.
Presented with all the evidence, they have to decide whether the marks at the edge of the pillow and all the new scientific data prove that the young man in front of them is a murderer.
There are two choices for a jury here. Either he went into that house and raped her and burgled the property and then left, and a random stranger came in and smothered her, or the person who raped her smothered her. That's the choice.
Even though you've listened to the whole trial and you know he's guilty, the evidence says he's guilty, you know, because they could come back with not guilty.
After 4 hours, the jury returns.
And unanimously said that he was guilty of 2 counts of rape, murder and burglary.
When the jury came back, he was plainly shocked. Craig Keogh stood there, and when sentence was imposed, he stood there with an element of resignation, but he didn't seem at any stage to show any kind of remorse. No sadness for her, no sadness for his own family, who appeared to be very decent people. From the beginning to the end, it seemed to me he was entirely focused on himself.
Keogh was given a life sentence and will only be eligible for parole after 32 years. But for all involved, this case has taken its toll.
When I went into Jane Hing's house, I was struck by the peace and tranquility in which she'd lived her life. She was a very simple lady. Beside her bed on one side was her Bible and a crucifix. And on the other side, as she had gone to bed, no doubt like every other night, she'd left her teeth on the side of the bed. And imagining just being in your own bedroom, in the comfort of your own home, and having a young, strong man, plainly intoxicated and under the influence of drunks, coming into your room at about 1:15 in the morning, waking you from your sleep, must have been terrifying. That, I think, stays with me.
This case will stick with me. It's one that the community will remember for a long time. It's one that the police officers who went to will remember for a long time.
I've covered numerous murder trials over the last 25 years. The rape of anyone is distressing. It's shocking, but this was particularly shocking because it involved the rape of an elderly woman.
I've been asked many times, what are my feelings towards Craig? And I have none, is the simple answer. I don't hate him because that's an emotion. I literally have no emotion towards him. But to think of what he did, it broke my heart to try and think about the fear that would have been going through her mind at the time. And then to be smothered with her own pillow. Jane was cremated and I put her ashes in an urn that sits on my mantelpiece so she can watch over Paddy every day until the day that he sadly joins her, in which case I will get him cremated and scatter their ashes someplace nice. Are you gorgeous? So they can be together again.
Hampshire Fire and Rescue received a call.
The house was really ablaze.
Fire officers, when they went upstairs, they found a naked female. There was blood on the walls. She had some cable ties wrapped around her wrists, and she had stab wound injuries to her neck.
I screamed and shouted and cried. I felt like half of me was gone.
I wouldn't have expected something like that to happen in this area. You just really feel for those children that have now got to grow up without a mother.
3 men arrived at her address, trying to break in, and had threatened to strangle her and have sex with her.
We got told by CID that they had somebody that they thought murdered my sister.
On the south coast of Hampshire, on the Fareham Peninsula, lies Gosport. Once the base for the Navy supply chain, this picturesque town acts as a commuter hub for Portsmouth City across the harbour.
The Gosport, I'd say, is quite a quiet place to live. It's got a lovely coastline, and it's quite good for families. There's quite good connections to schools around the area, and you can quite easily get across to Portsmouth, to Gunwharf. Yeah, I'd say it's quite a nice, relaxed place to live for families and also the elderly.
Gosport really does have its own identity. The only way you can get there is either on ferry from Portsmouth or a couple of roads coming in and out of Gosport. So you very much feel like you're on the peninsula there, kind of isolated.
I think there is quite a different culture. It seems it's quite separate from Portsmouth because of the water.
We've got a really good leisure centre, lots of nice pubs, and there's always a park just literally round the corner. And you can get anywhere on a bicycle as well because we've got fantastic cycle tracks here. We have a lot of people from all over the world really living here, and plus because it's naval, it just really has a lot of people here that are from all walks of life really.
You have areas where the housing is very close in, rammed together, and you have others, bigger, larger houses with the more affluent.
In Gosport, especially with this road, you definitely could knock on any door and ask for help, definitely. And a lot of people have lived here all their lives.
Which is true of 27-year-old Kelly Ann Case, who was born and spent most of her life in Gosport.
When we was growing up, she was very bubbly. She loved to do dancing. She loved sports. She was very fun. We used to like doing like rollerblading when we was younger. We would do like all different activities, even if it was just walking to the beach and just acting like big children. Even though we was probably 15, 16, she would love it. We would argue and bicker, but it would never last very long. We would always make up within about half an hour.
But Kelly had to grow up quickly, after she fell pregnant in her teens.
Kelly was a very young mum, but she never pictured herself having children. But she told everybody it was the best thing she ever did.
But being a single mum didn't stop her from finding the time for love.
She was always lucky in love. Sometimes they didn't work out for many reasons, but she was always careful with who she loved and who she didn't love. She was actually on her own for a while because that's what she wanted. She wanted to be on her own, but in past relationships, she has been very lucky in love. She would always make people laugh, and she would always be like the highlight of the day, no matter how down you was or how low you was. She would always make you laugh.
Police, what's your emergency?
I woke up and I opened the window, got the kids up, like you normally do, and then could smell a really strong smell of burning. It wasn't a normal smell of burning. I could see smoke coming out from the house.
The residents of a quiet street in the north of Gosport awoken to a house fire.
Hampshire Fire and Rescue received a call from a couple of builders that were in the area that saw smoke billowing from the address in Grange Crescent.
The house was really starting to go ablaze.
The builders were working in the area and they noticed some black smoke billowing from the address of Kelly's. And concerned that somebody may still be in there, they started banging on the windows trying to raise the alarm. There was no response, and Hampshire Fire and Rescue arrived at the scene fairly quickly.
There was probably 4 or 5 firemen in the back garden, which is very, very tiny. The glass was starting to smash. They were in and out of the house, obviously with the hoses going and trying to put the fire out.
Kelly's house is ablaze. And as neighbours watch, all thoughts turn to her children.
Because I'd seen the children going in and out every so often, and I was thinking, oh no, I hope they're not there. I hope nobody's there. That's what my worry was. I wanted to know if the kids were there because it was just a bit heartbreaking, really.
Fire crews break through the front door.
They found 2 areas that were alight in the ground floor of the address and then searched the rest of the premises.
The fire crews search the front bedrooms and find no one. But then, they make their way into the back bedroom.
And it was inside there that the firefighters found the very shocking and grisly discovery of Kellyanne Case's body in her bedroom.
Firefighters are suddenly confronted with a horrific scene. Kelly has been the victim of a brutal and sadistic attack.
Fire officers are used to going into dangerous situations and dealing with traumatic incidents, but when they went upstairs, they weren't expecting to find what they saw, which was a naked female tied up with multiple stab wounds and an obviously slashed neck. I mean, it was pretty traumatic.
What immediately happened then was the firefighters alerted the police whilst they tackled the fire that was still in the house.
And over the next 2-3 hours, more fire engines and police cars. The road was pretty much full. And everyone was talking about it on Facebook and on what's happening down there.
News spreads across the community and reaches Kelly's family.
I immediately rushed to Kelly's house and then spoke to the police officer and asked whether it was my sister's house. And they confirmed that it was. 2 CID officers come up to me and my mum. They both turned around and said that there is a body and it is deceased. I kind of screamed and shouted and cried.
Police believe there's no time to lose if they want to catch whoever was responsible for Kellyanne's killing.
Because of the way Kelly was found and the significant injuries that were so obvious, it was called as a murder investigation very, very quickly. And so we take control of the scene immediately. We try to identify who the victim is.
Detectives realised that the fire was set deliberately, potentially to destroy evidence.
We noticed there were 2 seats of fire initially. One was in the kitchen and one was in the living room, and it looked like bedding had been piled up and deliberately set alight. Upstairs in the back bedroom, Kelly was lying on the bed, naked. The bed was completely stripped. She had some cable ties wrapped around her wrists. She had some obvious stab wound injuries to her neck. Her face looked like it had taken some kind of physical assault as well. And there was blood on the walls and on the floors.
Police believe that the motive for the murder could have been sexual in nature.
I think when you find a female naked in bed like that, tied up with cable ties, the assumption one has to make is that this is possibly a sexual assault. The pathology is then carried out. Can we then confirm that?
The situation of Kelly's body and the manner in which she was attacked leads investigators to consider a terrifying possibility.
There's certainly a number of lines of inquiry and hypothesis that a senior investigating officer would form at the beginning of any homicide investigation, and one of those would be that this is a stranger attack. This is somebody who is not known to Kelly.
In the coastal town of Gosport, police are investigating the murder of 27-year-old mum of 3, Kelly Ann Case. Her body has been found after her house was deliberately set ablaze.
Kelly was stripped, she was tied up, and she was tortured and then brutally stabbed with a knife.
Detectives believe that the sadistic and sexual nature of the murder suggests it could have been a stranger who killed her. And so they have to consider a terrifying prospect.
When we commenced our investigation, we contacted the National Crime Agency to see if there are any outstanding similar offences anywhere in the UK that we could liaise with those local police forces and share information with.
With the police having to consider this could be the work of a serial killer, at the scene a major incident is declared, and the street has been secured.
We had tape going from the end of the road all the way across, down that end, and then they cordoned off all the way down the bottom, all the alleyways at the back. Yeah, it was just literally everywhere, tape everywhere. Even
All the little alleyways that
yeah.
go in between the houses had...
Yeah, because you've got a little alleyway there, and they were just cordoned off, didn't they? Yeah.
The news that a young woman has been brutally murdered stuns the close-knit community.
When we found out it was a murder, that was horrific. That sends alarm bells, you know, because you don't know who it is.
Covering Gosport, there's lots of low-level crime that goes on. There are lots of break-ins to houses and sheds and outbuildings. But deaths and murders are very few and far between and send shockwaves through the community when they happen.
It's just really sad that I wouldn't have expected something like that to happen in this area. And especially for a young woman who's kind of around our age, it definitely makes me feel quite uncomfortable. And you just really feel for those children, 3 children that have now got to grow up without a mother.
Whenever any murder happens, it has a huge impact on the community, particularly if the suspect is outstanding. So people are worried, who is it? Why have they done it? And will they strike again? So our job as the police is to try and reassure the community that, you know, we are working hard to try and catch the killer and that we will do that as quickly as possible.
Suspecting that this could be a stranger attack, officers start house-to-house inquiries, and a neighbour steps forward.
During our inquiries, we came across a witness who did identify a male that he saw at about 5 to 7 on the morning of the 30th of July, who was just in the area of Grange Crescent.
A neighbour had reported seeing a sort of a scruffy, unshaven person near Kelly Ann Case's home.
Described as looking a bit odd, surveying the premises, wearing a cap. And he said he's sort of driven up and down that road about that time for the last 10 years and never noticed anyone before. So this person definitely stood out for him and seemed suspicious.
Who was this man? And did he have anything to do with Kelly's death? But before detectives progress further, a check on Kelly's property uncovers a worrying development, which places their theory of a random stranger attack in doubt.
What was strange is that there was no sign of forced entry. The back door was unlocked, which would either suggest it's someone incredibly lucky trying doors, or somebody knew that Kelly was there and that the back door was unlocked.
Had Kelly known her killer? Or was it just pure chance that her door was unlocked so early on a weekday morning? The investigation shifts and focuses on Kelly's life circumstances.
In any homicide investigation, we would carry out a victimology, which is looking at the detail of the life of the victim, which includes, you know, previous partners, potentially people having an affair, issues at work that we might uncover. So it's quite common for us to go through the victim's history with a fine-tooth comb.
As detectives question friends and family, they uncover that Kelly was going through a difficult period in her life.
Kelly struggled with a lot of different things in life. She was always open and honest with people, but when she did struggle, sometimes Kelly did drink.
She'd fallen on some difficult times, and she'd recently had her children taken off of her by social services on a temporary basis. She had issues with alcohol and drugs, and I would describe her as vulnerable.
The investigation also uncovers elements about Kelly's lifestyle.
I mean, Kelly was well known. She had a wide circle of friends. Her neighbours weren't big fans of hers, if I'm honest. She would have regular visitors to the address, 3 or 4 parties a week.
She used to have parties with music and stuff.
I had seen quite a few people going in and out of the house, obviously just thinking they were just friends.
Often police would be called to excess noise issues, antisocial behaviour issues, and she would probably hang around with the wrong people, I would suggest.
As officers investigate further, evidence shows that Kelly had been threatened just a few months previously.
Back in March 2019, Kelly had had some kind of party at her address. There was an altercation there where the male ended up with a fractured jaw. And as a result of that, Kelly received some threats by family members of that man. And she had to flee the address for her own safety. So she left the area for some time and returned to Gosport a couple of months later.
I think she left for about 3-4 months, but she couldn't be without her family, so she decided to come back.
But with the threat still hanging over her, Kellyanne's neighbours noticed a change in her demeanour.
She kept herself to herself. She used to hang around out her front door having cigarettes, and you'd walk past her and she wasn't very chatty, but we didn't see a lot of her, to be honest. No. Heard a lot of her, but didn't see a lot of her.
Police believe Kellyanne was vulnerable and involved with some unsavoury characters. And after interviewing friends, key information points to a potential lead.
She had had this row the night before with one of her friends, so that was key that we identify who they were. We wanted to establish what the row was about and who was involved. So lines of inquiry were set in relation to identifying those individuals. But we also found out through her phone that she'd been receiving threats from 3 men who had arrived at her address, were trying to break in and had threatened to strangle and have sex with her. This was told to one of her friends. And obviously through house to house, we'd established that people had been at that address during the evening at various times. So again, it was really keen to try and identify those individuals quickly, because they may have some vital information, or they may be the killer and they may have vital forensic evidence on them still.
Could any of these people have something to do with Kelly's death? But before detectives can follow the leads, they get an unexpected call. A 32-year-old man called Will Vallender comes forward.
My sister was actually seeing Will Vallender at the time.
We believe that one of Kelly's family contacted Will Vallender and they notified him of the death. It then quickly dawned on him that he was possibly one of the last people to see Kelly alive, having left her address at about 6:30 that morning. As soon as Vallender made contact with the police, the decision was taken to arrest him on suspicion of Kelly's murder and seize his phone and his clothing so that we could then forensically examine those. One might question, well, if he's rang the police, why would you arrest him? Surely he's got nothing to hide. But if you flip it the other way and think, well, actually, he's got things to hide and he's now trying to give a reasonable excuse as to why his DNA may be at Kelly's address or on Kelly, and he's getting his story in first before the police catch up with him.
But Vallender's connection to Kelly and his ultimate link to her murder is about to point the investigation in a completely new direction.
He was obviously jealous, and he decided it was his turn to go and see Kelly and have sex with her.
In Gosport, police are investigating the murder of mum of 3, Kellyanne Case, who was found stripped, bound and stabbed after her house was set on fire. The day before she died, Kellyanne told her friends that 3 men had turned up at her house, threatening to break in and rape her. Police also have a report of a suspicious man loitering outside her house in the early hours of the morning. But all attention has fallen on Will Vallender, who has been arrested on suspicion of Kellyanne's murder.
When I found out Kellyanne was murdered, I felt like half of me was gone. Some CID officers come to my mum's house and told my mum everything that happened and that it was murder. And then my mum sat and read a piece of paper to me and my siblings of what actually happened. We got told by CID that they had somebody that they thought murdered my sister. We didn't actually know who it was at the beginning.
Police have arrested Kellyanne's friend, Will Vallender, who came forward saying he had spent the night with her before she died.
When Will Vallender was in custody, he was interviewed by detectives, and actually he gave a very detailed account of what his movements were the night before Kelly's death. And he explained that he'd been drinking most of the day. I think around midnight time, he received a phone call from Kelly. She was quite upset. She said she'd had some people round earlier in the evening. She'd fallen out with one of them, and could he come round?
He was out in Gosport and he was with his friend Brendan Rowan Davies.
So Brendan was a friend of Will Vallender. They would meet every now and then, and on that night, Kelly called. Will had been out all day drinking with Brendan, and Brendan decided to tag along. So they stopped off, bought some vodka, and then went off to Kelly's, where they consumed the vodka and also had some cocaine.
After drinking and taking cocaine, Vallender says he and Kellyanne went to bed, leaving his friend downstairs.
What Will Vallender then said was that him and Brendan Rowan Davies then left the home of Kelly at around about 6:30 in the morning.
Both Will Vallender and Brendan Rowan Davies left her home alone. They caught a taxi back to Vallender's house, and then Rowan Davies said he was going to go back to his home as well.
With Vallender claiming that Kellyanne was alive when he and Brendan left, police need to build up a full picture of what really happened that night. Key to this is interviewing his friend.
Officers were tasked to go and locate Brendan Rowan Davies, again, somebody who would have been the last person to have seen Kelly before she was found murdered. They went to his home address, and there was no response.
With no sign of Brendan, Vallender tells the police that he'd spoken to his friend earlier that day.
Vallender had contacted Brendan Rowan Davies to tell him to contact the police as well. And the fact that Brendan Rowan Davies didn't makes that extremely suspicious in my view.
What had happened to Brendan? Was he afraid to speak to the police? While the investigation unfolds, the community is coming together to pay their respects.
People kept coming down the road, laying flowers, laying teddy bears, candles. Her sister was there quite a lot, and it was just really sad. I felt for the children more than anything.
When Kellyanne Case's death was formally announced by the police and she was identified, there was an outpouring of grief for this young mum, and that sort of materialised with a fundraising campaign to raise money, which ultimately raised about £1,300 for her funeral.
So within 24 hours, the police located Brendan Rowan Davies. He was with his brother over in Portsmouth. Police were dispatched and he was arrested on suspicion of Kelly's murder.
Rowan Davies' response to the police when they mentioned the murder or death of this woman was, I had an idea about that. Apart from that, he said very little. He was taken into custody. He was questioned and he just replied no comment to the questions that were asked.
With Brendan refusing to answer any questions, detectives turned to CCTV analysis to verify Vallender's account.
Because Vallender gave a detailed account of his movements with Brendan Rowan Davies on the way to Kelly's address and also leaving there. So we were able to establish, following the route that Vallender said he took with Brendan Rowan Davies, various CCTV points to identify the two of them together.
The footage shows Vallender and Rowan Davies taking a taxi from the end of Kellyanne's Road at 6:30 a.m. The taxi drops them off at Vallender's address 10 minutes later, where they're seen crossing the car park. 20 minutes later, Rowan Davies is seen heading towards his flat, arriving back at just before 7 a.m. Vallander's account of his movements seems to be true. But then, police analyse what Brendan did next.
Brendan Rowan Davies made his way back to his home address. We had cameras in that area that then picked him up about half an hour later, leaving his home address, but this time in a change of clothing, which is suspicious in itself.
Brendan is captured on the bus CCTV. But where is he going?
So having picked up the suspect on the bus, we know he got off just outside Cambridge Road, and so we're able to then scope the area for CCTV. Unfortunately, we came across CCTV in the kebab shop just behind me on the corner of Cambridge Road and Brockenhurst Road.
Brendan is seen walking back towards Kelly Ann's house, just over an hour after leaving it.
The CCTV places him at the house for about 40 minutes.
Well, we believe that when Rowan Davies let himself into the address, he crept upstairs and Kelly was likely to be asleep. You know, it was the early hours of the morning. She'd been up all night partying. And he let himself in, and I think at that point he then held a knife point and then tied her up and brutally beat her. And then some 40 minutes later, he's then picked up again on CCTV, heading back towards his home address.
But he doesn't head straight home. Instead, he walks to his mother's house, a short distance from where Kelly Ann lives.
So we know that around 9 o'clock in the morning, Rowan Davies returned to his mum's address, where he then changed his clothes and then left that premises with a bag, and he was seen heading along this footpath. 2 hours later, a witness came forward who found some burning remains of clothes, which we then recovered.
Further CCTV evidence shows Brendan retracing his steps home.
We then find him at his home address on CCTV going to the bin shed area. But this time he's carrying 2 bags, one blue one and one white one, and he disposes of them.
Police immediately search his property and the bins.
What they find is a pair of knickers, which they believe to be Kelly's, and also some training shoes that have some blood on them.
Police also find items which match those found on the victim.
Kelly was bound up on the bed and she was tied up with some cable ties around her wrists. We found some further cable ties at the address that matched the same description of those found around Kelly's wrists.
Having uncovered both the means and the opportunity to commit the murder, the investigation turns to a potential motive and who this prime suspect is.
The connection between Rowan Davies and Kelly Ann Case was mainly through Will Vallander. Rowan Davies appeared to be this sort of hanger-on, this kind of tagged-along friend. You know, the two knew each other, or knew of each other, but I don't think they were ever close friends particularly.
He was a big man. He was 6'3", quite a strong man. We understand he had a low IQ, about 50 or 60, and he also had learning disabilities, including dyslexia. He was known to the police. He had about 6 previous convictions, but the most alarming one was a previous conviction for burglary of a house he broke into where the female was still on the premises. So a really concerning MO, I would suggest.
Detectives believe they have their killer, and when forensics return, it confirms their suspicions.
We then get the forensic results on the cable ties that were found around Kelly's wrists. And they have Kelly's DNA on them, obviously, but they also have Rowan Davies's DNA on them. So we went to the Crown Prosecution Service with all the evidence that we'd amassed against Rowan Davies, and they agreed to charge him with the murder of Kelly Ann Case.
Will Vallander is released without charge, and a trial date is set for Rowan Davies. But when he gets his day in front of the jury, his account of what happened suddenly puts the case in question.
He said he was grabbed by a masked man who was armed with a knife, who threatened to kill him if he told anyone what he'd seen.
In Gosport, Hampshire, police have charged Brendan Rowan Davies with the brutal murder of mother of 3, Kellyanne Case. CCTV footage shows that after spending the night partying with Kellyanne and her friend, Rowan Davies returned to her house on the morning after. His DNA has been found on zip ties used to restrain her, and the blood found on his trainers is Kellyanne's. But he denies murder. Whilst police believe they have a solid case, they also have concerns as the trial approaches. As not only was an unknown man spotted loitering outside Kellyanne's house on the morning of the murder, but she had recently been threatened.
The fact that we had these issues, these unknowns of potentially people threatening Kelly in the past, death threats to Kelly, people falling out with her, that was the biggest concern, is that we needed to convince the jury that Brendan Rowan Davies was the person responsible.
The trial gets underway at Winchester Crown Court.
The atmosphere in court for the trial at the beginning was tense. Obviously, there were family members and friends of Kellyanne Case who were anxious to see justice be done.
I was at the trial the whole 4 weeks in Winchester. I was there with many family members, including my mum, who never ever missed a day. It was very tiring, but it was all worth it. It helped me to try and grieve for her, because I didn't want to grieve for her. I didn't want to believe it. And still to this day, I still feel sometimes that she's going to walk through my door, and she's not.
The pressure is on for Hampshire Constabulary, especially as Rowan Davies, who had remained silent during the investigation, has made some concerning claims to his defence.
What Rowan Davies was saying was that he did go to the address on that night with Will Valander. He did leave with Will, but when he got home at 7 o'clock in the morning, he realised that he'd left his tobacco at the address, and so he went back to Kelly's to retrieve his tobacco. He said he found the back door left open, so when he went into the address, he went upstairs. He saw Kelly on the bed, naked, but she was unconscious. And then he was grabbed by a masked man who was armed with a knife, who threatened to kill him if he told anyone what he'd seen. He said he was so terrified he left the address and didn't tell anyone.
Could Rowan Davies be telling the truth? Was there an unknown masked assailant involved? But on examination, police believe there are major holes in his story.
He was cross-examined by the QC for the prosecution, and things just didn't stack up with his defence. The fact that he'd gone into the address and then suddenly this unknown masked attacker grabbed him but not harmed him at all, so there was no injury to him, that didn't stack up. He then tried to explain why his DNA was going to be on Kelly and why Kelly's DNA was going to be on him by the fact that he was then pushed onto Kelly. The cable ties that Kelly had around her arms were the same ones found at his home address. He couldn't give an explanation for that. The change of clothes he had with him at the time that he went to Kelly's that he then changed into when he went to his mother's address, he couldn't give an account for that. That didn't make sense.
He claimed to have been absolutely scared and frightened by this mystery man, but CCTV footage from inside the bus that he took when he went home after killing Kellyanne Case showed that he wasn't petrified. He went to his mum's house afterwards and didn't say to her that he was scared at all. He said nothing to anyone until he had to suddenly defend himself in court.
By Rowan Davies' account, he left Kellyanne alive but unconscious with the masked assailant at 8:30 a.m. But just 3 minutes later, builders noticed smoke coming from Kelly's house.
The timings of Rowan Davies' account don't stack up.
In court, there was a lot of disbelief as to what Rowan Davies was actually saying.
Under cross-examination, Rowan Davies is asked how the masked assailant could have tortured Kellyanne, killed her and set fire to the house in the 3 minutes after he left.
His whole case was that within about a 3-minute window, this mystery man had murdered Kellyanne Case, and that Rowan Davies had walked off terrified, too scared to tell anyone about it. Rowan Davies' whole case seemed to be ludicrously implausible. Just didn't seem to have been able to happen at all.
I thought Brendan's story was rubbish. This third person would not have allowed him to walk out of the house. You're not going to allow a person that have just witnessed you kill somebody, you're not going to allow them to walk. And in that space of grabbing his backy and then walking out of my sister's back door, not running, walking.
Whilst Rowan Davies' account is under scrutiny, the prosecution know they need to establish a motive for murder.
Brendan Rowan Davies clearly had some sort of sexual interest in her. It emerged at the trial that he'd said to her that he'd always fancied her.
But she just laughed that off and didn't take it seriously.
Kelly would never have a relationship with him, and Brendan didn't like that.
An analysis of Rowan Davies' phone also shows that he had followed the couple when they went to bed.
What Will Vallender and Kelly didn't know was that Brendan then, knowing that they were having sex in the room next door, got his phone out and started secretly videoing them having sex on his phone.
They said he had his arm put round the door kind of thing whilst he was filming that. He later deleted it, but this was a man who'd just been rebuffed by her with a laugh.
Will Vallender describes that he had left the house with Rowan Davies at 6:30 in the morning.
Will asked Brendan to make sure that the back door was locked, and Will would make sure that the front door was locked and post the keys back through. But we now know that Brendan didn't lock the back door, so he could gain entry when he come back.
CCTV then shows how Rowan Davies had made his way home, changed clothes, and returned to Kellyanne's house. The prosecution say he's armed with a knife and zip ties. He enters the house through the door he purposefully left unlocked.
It was quite clear that Rowan Davies had gone back there with a sinister intent.
When Rowan Davies led himself into the address, he crept upstairs and Kelly was likely to be asleep. And I think at that point he then held her at knife point and then tied her up and brutally beat her. He was obviously jealous that Will Vallender had sex with Kelly that night, and he decided it was his turn to go have sex with her. And she probably put up a fight, fought him off, and that's when he stabbed her.
Kellyanne suffered were likely to be from an attempt to torture and control her.
When the pathologist gave evidence at the murder trial, he told how Kellyanne Case had suffered some horrific injuries, and he had to show sort of CGI reconstructions of these and stab wounds and slash wounds to her neck. She did also have broken ribs, broken bones in her body. From what emerged at trial may have been a panicking Rowan Davies who tried to sort of revive her.
We did get told in trial that she would have felt it and it would have been very painful. She had multiple stab wounds from her chest to near her hips, just basically prodding her with a knife. And he cut her throat 7 to 10 times. It has played on my mind a lot, but she would have bled out really fast and she wouldn't have felt it after a couple of minutes because her whole body would have just gone numb.
The prosecution say that Rowan Davies then stripped the bed and used the bedding to set the house on fire. He then walked to his mother's house, where he changed into clothes he brought with him, and later goes to a nearby alley to burn the ones he had worn to kill Kellyanne. But he does keep one item, a pair of women's underwear.
And one might think this is possibly a trophy that Rowan Davies has kept as a result of this horrific crime. He had taken them believing that they were Kelly's when in fact they belonged to a friend.
Rowan Davies is cross-examined for 4 days, and his account of Kellyanne on the night before she died is one of concern.
He was talking about things like how he was consoling Kellyanne Case because she wanted to, according to Rowan Davies, sort of kill herself that night because her children had been taken away from her.
It's then disclosed to the jury that Rowan Davies had been convicted of burglary 2 years previously.
He'd actually gone into a Gosport mum's house kind of barged his way into the door, and the mum and children had to barricade themselves in a bedroom upstairs. But when the mum and her children came out, they found a butter knife that was on the stairs. When he was arrested for it, he was telling the police that he had heard someone was burgling the house, and that's why he'd acted and gone in, painting himself as a good Samaritan. And it was so shockingly similar to his defence case in the murder trial that it wasn't him, it was somebody else. I think that was a really chilling moment in the trial.
But the defence have one final seed of doubt to cast. The account of the 3 men whom Kelly had said were threatening to break in, rape and strangle her just a day before she died.
There is this fly in the ointment, was these 3 unknown people that had allegedly threatened Kelly 24 hours before that, threatened to break into her house and sexually assault her, and we never identified those individuals. I would suggest they probably didn't exist and were part of Kelly's paranoia at that time. As laughable as his defence case statement was, what was concerning for me is that there is a fly in the ointment there, for want of a better word. And all the defence need is to cast reasonable doubt around the account that the police say had happened, and then Brendan Rowan Davies walks.
After 3 weeks of hearing the evidence, the jury retires to consider the case.
The courtroom is an emotionally charged area at the best of times, and when you know the jury are coming back with a verdict, everyone is on tenterhooks, waiting for that verdict, and you hope as a police officer it's going to go your way, and you hope for the family it's going to go their way as well.
4 hours of deliberating.
After 16 days at trial, the jury came back unanimously with a guilty verdict of murder. And Rowan Davies was sentenced to 30 years imprisonment.
I was intently looking at Rowan Davies, and I saw him just sort of shaking his head as the foreman read out the guilty verdict.
When we found out that he was sentenced 30 years without parole, my family and me was happy that we got the justice for my sister, but it was never going to bring her back. I personally think that he is vile, he's disgusting, and I hope to God I'll never see him again. I think he's a very, very sick individual that should never ever be released.
I believe if you take a life like that and you murder someone so horribly, I think you take a life, you should serve life.
Yeah, life should be life,
Life
not
should be life.
not 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is, or you can get out of good behaviour and stuff like that. Life should be life.
It doesn't seem like justice. She was young, she was only 27, and she would have had years and years of her children, so it doesn't seem just in what she's lost and what her children have lost in years and what he's getting for that, because he'll come out and he would be a middle-aged, late-aged man, and he can still do things with his life, and that's something that she'll never get the opportunity to do.
After 2 years, Kellyanne's family are slowly coming to terms with their loss.
Us as a family have lost a big part, especially my mum and her children. They've lost their mum, and my mum has lost her daughter. Kelly was always the happiest and the kindest and the caring out of all of us. And I would always like her to be remembered for the person she was and not for